The hour being 7 o'clock on Monday, March 22nd, 2021. I'd like to call the City Council meeting, Laconia City Council meeting order. Before we start, though, I'm going to ask Councilor Lippman to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilor. Prior to beginning the meeting, I'll read the introduction for electronic meetings, and so appreciate your indulgence as we go through this. As chair of the Laconia City Council, due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis, and in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are, A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting. All members have the ability to communicate during this meeting through the Zoom platform, and the public has access to watch the live YouTube video at www.youtube.com/LaconiaNH. Listen to this meeting through dialing the following phone number, 1-312-626-6799, or participate by the Zoom app, webinar ID 846-5395-1255, password 684364. B, providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of how to access the meeting using Zoom, and instructions are provided on the City of Laconia's website at www.laconianh.gov. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anybody has a problem, please call 527-1265, extension 243, or email at cityclerk@laconianh.gov. And D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking roll call attendance when each member states his presence. Also, please state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. I would ask the city clerk, Cheryl Hebert, to call the roll, please.
Councilor Cheney.
Present in the city council chamber.
Councilor Susie.
Home in my office alone.
Councilor Lippman.
Home in a room where I'm alone. There are other people in the house though.
Councilor Haynes.
Here in city council chambers.
Councilor Hamel.
Home and alone.
Councilor Felch.
Home and alone.
Mayor Hosmer.
In the mayor's office in Laconia City Hall, and no one's in the office with me. This evening, our recording secretary will be the aforementioned Cheryl Hebert, city clerk. We'll also are joined by Scott Myers, city manager, and I believe Glenn Smith helping us with the IT and also attending the meeting as well. Moving along to number 7, which is acceptance of meeting minutes from previous meetings. The regular meeting minutes of March 8th, 2021. Minutes of the meeting were distributed to the City Council on Wednesday, March 10th, 2021. With no corrections or changes submitted to the clerk, the minutes will be accepted as distributed. On item number 8 on your agenda, which is consent and action items. Under 8A, the topic is acceptance and expenditure of unanticipated funds in amounts less than $10,000 made available during the fiscal year as per Council Resolution 2019-24 and RSA 31:95-B. As reported at the City Council meeting of January 27th, 2020, the Enablement Group has been contracted to create a video documentary of the Colonial Theater renovation project at a cost of $10,000, with funding provided through community donations, and the city is in receipt of a very generous donation of $1,500 from Rist Frost Shumway PC towards this endeavor. Acceptance of this donation will offset a portion of the cost of developing this documentary. With acceptance of this donation, the entire project costs will be offset by community donations, which is once again quite a testament to the community we are fortunate enough to call home. This report was submitted by Scott Myers, so I'd be looking for a motion to move to accept the $1,500 donation from Rist Frost Shumway PC to be used to create a video documentary of the Colonial Theater renovation project. So made by Councilor Hamel, seconded by Councilor Lippman. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Yes.
Counselor Susie,
Yes.
Counselor Littman,
Yes.
Counselor Haynes,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Felch.
Yes.
6 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes, and can't wait to see the video when it's completed. Councilor Hamel, will you have a role in that video?
A very small one.
You should have a starring role, all the work that you've put in there. Moving right along to number 9 on your agenda, which is on presentations. We have the 2020 fiscal year audit comprehensive annual financial report, which Scott and City Manager Myers kindly made available to all of us prior to the weekend. I hope everybody studied up on it. So, hello. Go right ahead, Scott, if you'd like to segue us.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we do have the audit comprehensive annual financial report. Glenn Smith and his team have done a lot of work on it this year, and a little more challenges with COVID and timing and some of those things as well. So we are a touch later than we usually are. So I know Glenn looks like he's queuing up here the team from Melanson who performed the independent audits for us. So I see a friendly face and another friendly name, soon to be a face, I hope. But we have Scott McIntyre and Pat Mohan with us. And I tell Pat whenever I see him, I always want to think of him as Patrick Mahomes, and he tells me that's okay, but it's Pat Mohan is the name. So not sure which one of you are taking the lead, but I'll turn it over to Scott or Pat.
You're on mute, Scott.
Here we go.
Thank you, Counselor, for reminding me I was on mute. Been doing this a year now, and I still make that same mistake. So anyway, thank you very much for the introduction. Patrick and I are here tonight to give you a quick walkthrough of our audit of your financial statements. As the city manager indicated, we're a little bit behind schedule, particularly as we were a year ago. It was in January of 2020 that Patrick and I were in City Hall providing you with the results of our then June 30, 2019 audit. We're about 6 weeks behind that schedule. Presenting here tonight on the 22nd of March. The 2020 audit process was delayed a little bit. The city needed additional time to complete all of its required reconciliations and postings to its general ledger. Patrick will get into some of the details, but the city was posting some journal entries for your June 30, 2020 financial statements as recently as in January of 2021. So a little over 6 months after year end, entries were still being posted. We also needed to propose a few audit entries in order to pull the financial statements together that are in your package tonight. But nonetheless, we've come through the audit process, and our opinion on your financial statements is, as it's been for the past number of years, and it's what we call in our profession an unmodified opinion. What that really means is that, in our opinion, your financial statements are materially fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles in the United States of America. They're consistent with generally accepted accounting principles is the short way of saying that. And also when we look, and Patrick will get into some of the details in a minute, when we start looking at, in particular, your general fund balance sheet, despite the challenges we had in completing the 2020 audit for reasons I talked about, and also COVID as well, that certainly can't be understated. If you look at your general fund balance sheet, it's still a solid looking balance sheet. You had very positive results of operations on a budget versus actual basis for fiscal year 20, and you see a modest increase in your unassigned fund balance, which is very often the first place that most readers will turn to when they look at the financial position of a city. In your case, they'll look at your unassigned fund balance of your general fund. With that brief introduction, I'll turn it over to Pat to get into some of the specifics, and then between the two of us, we'll try to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you, Scott. Good evening to everybody. As Scott mentioned, I'm going to be going over some of the key areas in the financial statements, and then allowing time for some questions and answers. And then we'll also be going over the management letter this evening. I will also do my best to give you the page number in the physical document, and then also give you the PDF number if you're looking online using that. With that being said, if you can turn to page 9, also PDF page 23, would like to go over a quick item in the management's discussion and analysis. In particular, it's the last paragraph on page 9, and it speaks about the general fund. And the city felt that it was necessary, and it's also appropriate to discuss the general fund unassigned fund balance as being unchanged from the prior year. There was budgetary results of approximately 1.7 million, which we'll go over in detail in a little bit. And that was offset by the use of fund balance of 770,000, which was used to reduce the tax rate. Part of the modest change was due to a restriction in non-spendable fund balance of just about $1 million to reserve for a cash deficit in the internal service fund. Again, we'll be going over that in short, but I just wanted to point that out in the management's discussion and analysis. If you can turn to page 17. Page 17 is the governmental funds balance sheet. In particular, our focus is going to be on the general fund, but the city also presents the non-major governmental funds, which is your special revenue, capital projects, and permanent funds, while also noting a total governmental funds position. Would like to start by recognizing the property taxes at the end of the year. It's the third number from the top in the general fund column. The balance was 4.7 million. And the reason I bring that up is because that dropped about $1.7 million from the prior year. And why that's important is that even with due to COVID and some other things, the city was able to get their tax bills out and quicker than they did the year before, which is representation of that AR balance going down. The offset to that was cash essentially going up by 1.3 million. And when I say cash, I'm meaning cash and investments. And if you go about 2/3 of the way down under deferred inflows of resources, the other offsetting factor is taxes collected in advance. That was 19.4 million at June 30, 2020. That same balance last year was just over $17 million. Again, completing the circle of the fact that the city got out their tax bills and collected a lot of that money in advance ahead of where it was last year. We'd like to move down into the next basically bracket of areas, which is your fund balances. There's a real full note on page 47, which breaks down all the detailed balances of these, but we're going to stay on page 17. In particular, we're going to talk about that non-spendable fund balance of $1.2 million. Last year's balance was approximately 200,000, and that represents the inventories and prepaids. And again, that balance this year is fairly close to what it was. The large change was just over $1 million, and that's representing the classification and conservative reserve that the city made in order to offset the internal service funds balance, which is right now in essentially a cash deficit. The prior year was 500,000, and in the current year, it's reached $1 million. And with generally accepted accounting principles, the unknown of being able to transfer that money within a year's time necessitates really making a journal entry to reserve those monies from unassigned fund balance. So that is the change in the non-spendable this year. Again, last year was 500,000. It wasn't in the non-spendable, but as that balance has increased, it was justified in order to making that reserve until those monies can be transferred over. You then have your committed fund balance, which is 3.5 million. That's your capital reserve monies. Again, there's detailed balances on page 47. Your assigned number is your encumbrances. That did drop almost by half, meaning that the city's carrying forward half of what it did the year before. And then we'd like to talk about the assigned fund balance, the unassigned fund balance of $3.3 million. Again, it was a moderate increase from the prior year, but that doesn't necessarily tell the full picture because again, there was just over $1 million reserve taken out of that number. There was also $770,000 worth of unassigned monies to use against to reduce the taxes. So overall, that number being predominantly similar to last year is a positive thing. So I don't want to just shortfall that by saying that there was a moderate increase. There were significant factors in keeping that number as a whole. Your total fund balance is 9 million. Again, up from last year, there was a $601,000 increase over the prior year. So all in all, the general fund had a very good year. Again, acknowledging that there was some reclassification and reserve of some monies. If you could please go to page 61, which is also PDF page 75. We'll go over how the general fund got there predominantly. Page 61 is the general fund budget versus actual, and it's strictly the general fund that we're talking about. Our focus is going to be to the far right, the variance with the final budget and, against the actuals. And again, overall, the city had a good year. If we're looking at the total revenues, the revenues were just about 850,000. Again, the total expenditures, there was a very good turn back this year. And then the overall was a very good, meeting the last number. Bear with me 1 second, of $1.7 million. My contacts just got a little fuzzy. Apologize for that. But some of the key highlights were, again, the city was able to, in the area of revenues, have a significant increase in the penalties, interest, and other taxes over last year. Last year's was a deficit just short a shortfall of about 200,000. This year they were able to surpass the budget, again collecting on old levies, and there was an additional payment in lieu of taxes in relation to the Taylor home. Your overall expenditures were very good. There was a $150 turn back into contingency, and overall there was your capital outlay was under and your debt service was under, leading to some significant turnbacks this year, including, as I mentioned before, encumbrances being about half of what they were last year. So all in told, after using $770,000 worth of free fund balance for unassigned, the city was able to make up that money and put that back into the general fund overall. So as a whole, the city really budgeted conservatively and met those budgets. Again, in a COVID year, there was about approximately 3 months where some of the expenditures were significantly less, certainly maybe in the education, and then some of the other departments. Again, some of the revenues were slightly different, but overall, the city had a very good year in regards to the budget versus actual, given the overall impact of COVID. Again, that's a brief overview, allowing for some questions and answers on some of the other areas prior to going to the management letter. If there's no questions, then I'll just.
Councilor Littman, were you looking to ask a question?
I just want, usually cover a few things in the management statistics section.
Okay.
I thought maybe it might be good to do that first, then take some questions.
Okay, so
That was-
Pat, are you going to go through the? I guess you can continue on, Pat.
Traditionally, we haven't really hit upon the statistical area. One of the things I didn't go over just in the course of time was looking at your statement of net position, which is the city as a whole. And the basis for that was predominantly there was, for the most part, a lot of consistency in the city. Probably the largest change outside of a new bond, which is the city is aware about, is the net position. I'm sorry, the net pension liability. That again has, it was a slight increase. And as you know, the New Hampshire retirement system has altered and adjusted their discount rate, which will have an impact for next year. So that net pension liability will be going up next year. However, it's not going to be a one-for-one. There's going to be deferred inflows and deferred outflows that help to smooth that change over, meaning that as the actuaries look and make these types of adjustments, they look to amortize those adjustments over a 5-year period. However, with each 5-year period, another cycle is going to fall off, and that will impact your pension expense. So your pension expense will be going up next year because the New Hampshire retirement system report is out at this stage. And with the net pension liability approximately 50 million, that net pension liability next year, that's city, school, and waterworks, is approximately 66 million. Again,
Patrick, just if I may, Patrick, just to make sure everybody's following along with us, if you have a hard copy, Patrick's referring to page 14. If you're online, it's on page 20. If you have a PDF of it on your computer, it's PDF page 28.
thank you, Scott. Missed that part.
Thank you, Scott. Pat, could you work us through? Could you go back just a little bit and work us through line by line here?
Line by line.
Well, I'm just catching up to page 14 right now, so I just want to, if you're referencing a certain line, can you just point it out which one it is? That's all.
My apologies.
That's okay.
The net pension liability is what I was discussing. It's in the middle of the page, and at the end of the year, it's for governmental activities is $49.2 million. Again, overall, the total net pension liability, which is in the far right-hand column, is the total. That number will be going up next year. And overall, looking at the statement of net position, as I was saying, really the city was consistent. And that's why I did not really look at the statement of net position and moved right on to the general fund balance sheet. But in going back and giving a little bit more detail again to rehash, the New Hampshire retirement system, the current discount rate that was used for the 6/30/20 was 7.25. That number is going to be adjusted downward 6.75. So that's going to really impact the changes in assumptions, and it's also going to impact the overall investments as far as their analysis at year end, at least by the actuaries. And right now that report is out, and that number will be up to about 66 million. The bottom line effect, if we're looking in the governmental activities, if we go right to the bottom, your total net position will more than likely decrease because of that increase in pension expense. Your unrestricted, again, would more than likely increase as far as a deficit because of that increase in pension expense. And overall, predominantly, the change in your total net position, which was 22.4 million, predominantly that change was made up of the current year pension expense that was recognized in the financial statements, which was 1.4 million. However, in thinking about that, I'd like to point out that the pension expense is not a dollar amount that the city issues a check to the New Hampshire retirement system. Those monies are paid monthly to the New Hampshire retirement system based on your monthly payroll. So in referencing the word pension expense, that is a term used by the actuaries and part of the whole function. The city will continue to do what they've always done, which is recognizing the payroll at the end of the month and the amount due to the New Hampshire retirement system. Again, the statement of net position overall was fairly consistent. If we would like to go further into some of the details, if we could turn to page 21, which is the business activities. We'll go through the water and sewer. The water and sewer is on PDF page
35.
Thank you, Scott. Overall, water and sewer fund both had good years. From a proprietary fund statement of net position, it's again on the accrual basis. User fees were consistent with the prior year. There was a slight uptick. However, they weren't huge. And then when we go to the total net position, the waterworks was an increase of approximately 81,000, and then sewer had approximately a 524,000 increase, which is representative of your total net position. Overall, again, both had good years. Charges for services were up in both funds. That is producing that increase in net position. And overall, predominantly, one of the bigger factors is the depreciation expense, which remains fairly consistent with other years as far as the way things are being depreciated, the number of years and those types of things. With the amount of work that's being done in the city for both water and sewer, expectations would be that those depreciation numbers should go up in the next 2 years once those are fully brought online.
Mayor Hosmer, if you like, I think maybe I can answer a little bit more of what Councilor Lippman was looking for, and then we could go to the management letter. I think what Councilor Lippman, correct me if I'm wrong, some of the statistical analysis is what the city puts together towards the back of the report, not so much what Scott and Pat are auditing. So if I can just take maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and I can have councilors turn to page 78.
Thanks, Scott.
You can see our outstanding debt on a per capita basis. So if you look at that chart on 78 in the hard copy, you can see in 2011, our bond level was at 32 million and change issued, peaked at around 2015. That's most likely because when we did the Hewitt Technical Center and the big high school project and did with the QZABs and the football fields, that probably shows that peak. And you can see that since 2015, when we were at a $41 million level, we've gone back down to just short of 38 million now. So on the per capita basis, we were a little over 2,000 a person per capita in 2011, and we're just short of 2,300. So some steady, consistent use of bonds, but not being overly aggressive across the city. And this would show out on page 80, when you can look at the legal debt limit in the 2-line chart there of what the school could be allowed and what the city could be allowed to be able to use as a % of our assessed valuation. So the city could be, utilizing as much as $76 million in debt service, in the school 177, and you can see the percentages down below that we are well below that. So again, we continue to try to balance the amount that we use in cash when we put together the budget, as well as use debt service. And I think that's reflective on page 82 of the document. You can look at our % of principal and interest payments as it's represented as a portion of the entire general fund expenditures. And again, going back to 2011, you can see that figure was 7.7%. It dropped down into the high sixes, went as high as 7.5%. And this year we're settled at, for the year closed June 2020, we settled at 7.2%. So again, just a little bit of statistical stuff that Glenn and his team put together, just to show you that, why it's important to have cash in our operating budget, as well as use debt prudently. And I think those kind of identify how and why the city is doing what we do.
Scott, the other two that I think are worth looking at for the community is on 76 in terms of what the assessed valuation is. And then also 76, we're up to 2.3, almost 2.37 billion compared to 10 years ago at about 1.9 billion. But I think also reflected in the tax rates on page 77 that while the tax rate is a function, so we talk about a number of different things in terms of what you pay, the actual tax rate today is lower than it was in 2011.
Yes, and as you know, I like to say the tax rate means nothing. It's all about spending. And I know some people cringe when I say that, but the tax rate, is just an answer to an equation. So as the assessed valuation goes up, your tax rate will fluctuate. So you're right. So if you looked at the chart on page 76, 2011, we were probably just wrapping up that very serious depression of 2008, 9, 10, 11. And that was just about the time I started with the city. In value, assessed valuation citywide was over $2 billion prior to that. So it did drop down below the $2 billion level. And you can see it kind of bottomed out at about year 2014 at a $1.821 billion. Since then, we've added close to 500 million in the assessed value as the economy's rebounded and as real estate has grown. So we will continue to watch that. We don't have to tell secrets. Everyone knows it's a hot market right now, and different, as I always say, different property classes will perform at different levels. But we continue to see strong growth and demand in the real estate market here in the state and across the country, really. And again, as I share with all of you, our assessing year wraps up on March 31st. So that's where we draw the line in the sand, so to speak, and use the values kind of locking in there. And that's what we'll be updating and to be used in next year's assessed valuation base. But if I had to look at my crystal ball right now, I would think we would see another uptick, not only because of building permits being pulled, but just because of market-driven conditions. All right, maybe we move on.
Thanks, Scott. That was really helpful.
Maybe we move on to the management letter.
Yes, I'd like to go over some of the bullet items. Not going to go over in detail because I think the bullets certainly identify the pieces in the management letter. There are 3 comments. The first being reestablishing controls of journal entries in the general ledger. And again, I think Scott McIntyre hit it on it at the beginning of the meeting as far as the number of journal entries being done, the general ledger, full reconciliations across all funds, not just general fund, and really making those as quickly as possible at year end. Is in regards to the city making adjustments, into the January time period. Again, noting COVID, remote working, and those types of things, plus personnel changes over the last 2 years. We still found this journal entry from last year, or sorry, management letter coming from last year. There's some other bulleted items as noted, again, as we found during our audit. The second comment did touch upon already, addressing the deficit in the internal service funds. And talking with city's management is certainly aware of the internal service fund and the amount of monies that are being moved over from the general fund in order to take care of those services provided in your motor pool. Again, a non-spendable fund balance was made to reserve some of those monies. Again, thinking that it's going to be over a 1-year time frame, and it's talking with management. That is some of the ideas going on right now. And then the third one was improving control over the school accounting. There was some turnover there as well in the most recent year. And what we found primarily, one of the largest was the year-end accrued payroll not being recorded, in addition to a couple of the other bullet points down there. Again, needing to be pointed out at this point in time. Those were essentially the highlights of the management letter as we went through the audit.
Scott Myers, this is Henry Lippman.
Yes, Counselor.
I think it'd be helpful either at a finance committee level or the full council level just to go over, get everybody up to speed on internal service fund again. We've got some new counselors and just make sure everybody understands the operation of that, what technically the entry meant, and kind of really where we are with that. I just something I'd suggest we do either as a full council or in committee.
No, absolutely. I think probably full council makes a lot of sense. And that way everybody is hearing the same information and has an opportunity to chime in and get a better understanding of it.
That'd be great.
Maybe we could do that as an early start some evening, Ms. Mayor.
In conclusion, if there was no other questions on the management letter and or financial document, I'd like to point out that, certainly the audit process is a long process and not done overnight. And would like to point out that the city was very helpful, all the departments, as far as asking for information, answering some hard questions, and certainly moving through all the things that are required to go into this document for us to help compile the city's financial statement. So I would like to point out their efforts in getting us all this information to get in here this evening. And then certainly ongoing conversations with them in regards to the comments and things like that that are being noted and will certainly be available to make any recommendations and or how they can achieve getting there. It's just not a comment, but it's also a work in progress to assist in the capacity that we can assist the city. So we'd just like to point out those things in closing.
Thanks, Pat. Pat, I was wondering, and I don't know if you may not have the answer to this, but going to the statistical section, I was particularly interested in the total net position on page 14, which at 49.3 million is anticipate it's going to go down. So one, can we have any ability to predict how much it's going to go down? And second of all, is there a place in the statistical section that I can look at this in a 10-year window?
There is a
Pat, I can try to find it for you. Give me a second.
if you could, please. Engaging I'll start with the first part, engaging the total net position as far as estimated decrease without certainly having everything compiled, meaning all the funds to see exactly where the general fund stands, even currently, taking into consideration the impact of COVID. It is a little tough to even try and estimate that number. I can talk about the accruals that'll be necessary, meaning that certainly with the additional bond money, there would be interest accrual. And certainly with the pension rising, there would certainly be additional expenditures there.
Right. So I'm not asking you, I don't want you to speculate beyond where you're comfortable. I don't think that's really worthwhile. I was trying, if you had a number, it could give us some sense, great. But if you're not comfortable, I respect that based on the information you have in front of you.
That would be correct.
Okay.
Just because the governmental activities represent all of your funds coming together that are non-business type.
Right.
Mayor Hosmer, the big driver of that is going to be the change in the retirement system, though, and that's
Yeah.
that's really due to the change in the assumed rate of return. So we all know and full disclosure, I'm a trustee of the trust fund and have been for a couple of years right now. So what happened back in 2009 was there was an unfunded liability that we put together, legislature, retirement system, the folks put together a 30-year plan and kind of sliced off that part of the unfunded liability and said, let's pay it off over a 30-year period. Let's get a schedule and do that. And that's what's been happening basically since 2009, 2010. So this 30-year amortization is due to be paid off in 2039. As Pat had mentioned, there are some layered amortizations that go on top of that, could be either positive or negative, depending on different 5-year blips. So we're not just adding to one big unfunded liability; they're breaking it up into smaller pieces as we go along, so they're easily identifiable and manageable. What happened this time around is, as trustees, we work with the actuaries, we work with the investment professionals, we updated mortality tables on municipal employees and a couple of other things. We had information like you wouldn't believe. And the big driver was, can we really expect a 7.25% rate of return on blended investments that should be somewhat conservative, because right now the retirement system is paying out more on an annual basis than it's collecting in contributions from municipalities and the state. So you kind of got that, I don't know, oversimplify it, but a 60-40 blend of stocks and bonds. That's not quite what it is, but for presentation purposes, it gets us in the ballpark. We know that on a conservative type of portfolio like that, you're relying on the interest rates and interest rates for return, and the interest rates are running at 0 or slightly above. So we had to make an adjustment in one of the assumptions, and that was over time, we don't think that we're going to earn 7.25%. We're only going to earn 6.75%. And when you put that up with the hundreds of public pension systems across the country, we are now slightly underneath the average. I don't want to quote the exact number, but I think it's a little over 7% roughly is where the average pension fund is. And with our reduction, we're at 6.75. So again, as you had heard earlier, try to be a little more conservative. That's where we're at. And that's what's driving it. When now all of a sudden, instead of earning 7.25 on your investments over a period of time, we're only earning 6.75%. That's driving the increase in rates that'll kick in on July 1. On the positive side, the assets have grown over the past 12 months or so, and they're currently stand, and this was as of, I'll say at the end of February, 1st of March, over $10 billion overall are in the assets in the retirement system corpus. And that's up significantly from a low $9 billion. I don't know if I said billion or million, but 10 billion is there. That's up from a low 9-point-something billion basically a year ago at this time. So there has been some good growth. But again, making that change in the assumption is what's impacting the rates. And that's what's going to extend the amount of the unfunded liability and make that number grow on paper just because we changed the assumed rate of return.
Gotcha. Okay. But what you're doing is it's a realistic approach to how we're handling this liability in the pension. Right.
And because we've changed the assumed rate of return, that's going to drive our unfunded share higher because we've made a more conservative estimate. And when we recalculate the numbers, that the unfunded goes up.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Yes, go right ahead, Councilor Lippman, then Hamel.
Page 65 and 66 give you some additional kind of views of the pension plan. 65, the top chart, and gives you what the percent proportion of share of the net and how that's changed over time. And then the bottom chart on page 66 gives you percentage of covered payroll, which you can see it's, part of our pension liability is both a function of payroll today versus payroll tomorrow too.
Thank you, Councilor Lippman. Councilor Hamel, did you have a question?
Basically a comment, and that $60 million that we have on our books, and you can correct me, Scott, but that there is a portion of the total state pension that's been divided among the municipalities, and that's our cost of that pension fund, correct, Scott?
I don't know which guy you're asking, but yeah, so there's roughly, a $4.85 billion unfunded. And based on our payroll and the total payroll that's covered under the system, that's our approximate share. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
so
proportional share.
Each
Yeah,
state
so-
and town has a portion of that total liability of the pension fund.
Right. So if they said we're closing the fund tomorrow, everybody needs to pony up in order to make it whole. That's the number in a spot in time that would be what we would have to come up with.
Okay, so I had read somewhere, and you can correct me if I'm right or wrong, but the state's liability on the pension fund a couple of years ago was in a deficit of $5 billion. I heard recently that that's gone up to $6 billion. And if that's true the case, does the extra $1 billion, is that part of that 60 million that we have added to our books, or is that something that's going to be coming down in the future also?
So I think you're splitting two things here. So this is a snapshot as of June 30th last year. So the changes in the rate assumptions have not factored in. If you looked at the page that Councilor Littman just referenced on page 65, and you look at our proportionate in the middle column, proportionate share of net OPEB liability, you can see the dollars, dropping from, the 5 millions down to the 4 millions as a proportionate share. That was part of paying off the 30-year amortization. That may not be the best column to be comparing to, but Scott, you can help me on that. But we were paying down regularly, and what's going to drive it next year is what I just explained, was changing the assumed rate of return to be a more conservative number, which is expanding the amount of the unfunded liability.
Okay, but do you know though if that's a fact that the deficit that the pension is running went from 5 to 6 billion?
I don't know the exact number, but I mean, a couple of years ago, it was at a 57 or a 58% funded level, and it was most recently up to a 63% funded level. So there's different ways of looking at it. But again, just because we're making a change in an assumed rate of return, that drives the amount of the unfunded much higher, because you're not going to get there as quickly because you're not earning what you were expecting to earn.
Okay, so our monthly contribution that's being paid out to the state, because it's gone up to 60 million, is now increased also, correct?
Across all four groups, which are teachers, employees, and group 2, police and fire, a ballpark, we'll expect to see about a 20% increase in our contributions based on payroll beginning on July 1st.
Okay, and right now we're doing $24,000 a month according to the 2020. Well, it might be more now, but is that correct? Is that close? Page 66.
I would say that number sounds low. You
Okay.
would find the number we budgeted in our budget book. You would find it in the individual departments for police, fire, and public works. And then collectively in finance, you'll find all the other smaller departments. You'd find a similar number
Okay.
in the school budget, and then you also have waterworks in there as well. So that number sounds a little bit low to me. But it'll be in your budget book. And
But
easy
it
to
will be going up. It will be going up because of the extra $10 million added to that, though, from 50 to 60.
It's going up because the assumed rate of return was reduced. And when you're not expected to earn as much money, but you still need a certain amount of money to go in and pay off your debt, you've got to get it somewhere, and that's coming from employer rates.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Any other questions or comments for our guests? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Scott and Pat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Certainly a lot to work through here, but appreciate your hard work.
Thank you, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to, that was 9. We're moving on to number 10 right now, which is citizens' comments for matters not on the agenda. If citizens are in attendance and would like to speak to any city issues that are not on the agenda, now would be the appropriate time. You raise your hand. Mr. Smith will let you in.
Mr. Mayor, nobody has raised their hand.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Moving along to number 12.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I'm going to say in true form, in a minute I said that somebody raised their hand, but they just put it back down again. So here we go.
All right, thanks. Moving along to number 12 under nominations, appointments, and elections. First up is Charlie Sinclair requesting reappointment as the Planning Board Representative on the Historic District Commission to a 3-year term expiring at the end of March 2024. Mr. Sinclair is currently a regular member of the Historic District Commission as the Planning Board Representative. His term expires at the end of March 2021, and he is requesting reappointment. At their February 4th, 2021 meeting, the Planning Board reaffirmed their wish for Mr. Sinclair to represent them on the Historic District Commission. Interviews of individuals applying for appointment or reappointment to various boards and commissions were held at the Council's March 8th, 2021 meeting. Appointments will be made at this evening's meeting. So Mr. Sinclair's application was included in the March 8th, 2021 agenda packet. Right now, I'd be looking for a motion to reappoint Charlie Sinclair as the Planning Board Representative on the Historic District Commission to a 3-year term expiring at the end of March 2024. So made by Councilor Cheney, seconded by Councilor Littman. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Yes.
Counselor Susie, Counselor Susie,
You're muted. Yes.
thank you. Counselor Littman,
Yes.
Counselor Haynes,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Felch.
Yes.
6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Congratulations, and thank you for your service, Charlie Sinclair. Moving along to number 12B, which is Laura Ringer requesting appointment as a regular member of the Parks and Recreation Commission to a 3-year term expiring at the end of March 2024. There's currently 1 vacant regular member position on the Parks and Recreation Commission. Interviews of individuals applying for appointment or reappointment to various boards and commissions were held at the Council's March 8th, 2021 meeting. I think you've all had an opportunity to read Ms. Ringer's application, which was included in our March 8th agenda packet. So right now, I'll be looking for a motion to appoint Laura Ringer as a regular member of the Parks and Recreation Commission to a 3-year term expiring at the end of March 2024. So made by Councilor Hamel, seconded by Councilor Felch. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Yes.
Counselor Susie,
Yes.
Counselor Littman,
Yes.
Counselor Haynes, Counselor Haynes, oh. Just hit it once.
He says yes.
Just shake your head yes or no. Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Felch,
Yes.
6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Congratulations, Ms. Ringer, and thank you for your willingness to serve. Moving along to item number 14, public hearings. We have a public hearing on resolution RES 2021-04 relative to the acceptance of the New Hampshire Department of Safety Homeland Security grant in the amount of $250,000 to fund a command vehicle for the Laconia Police Department. Notice of this public hearing was made available in the March 10th, 2021 edition of the Laconia Daily Sun and posted at Laconia City Hall, Laconia Public Library, Laconia Community Center, and the SAU. Action on this item will be taken up under unfinished business this evening. So at 7:55 p.m. on March 22nd, 2021, I'd like to open the public hearing. You have an interest in this issue or this item, and you're tuning in, now would be the appropriate time to raise your hand so Mr. Smith can give you an opportunity to speak.
Mr. Mayor, nobody has raised their hand.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'd like to close the public hearing at 7:56 p.m. Moving right along now to the mayor's report on number 15 on our agenda, and my comments will be limited to one subject tonight and be fairly brief, but certainly they're brief because we have a lot of work to do, but certainly not because of the nature of the comments. You know, this week, last Friday afternoon at Laconia Middle School, Kathy Bayless was named the New Hampshire Social Studies Teacher of the Year. I think a remarkable achievement for someone who's been teaching for 4 years in the city of Laconia. She was recommended for this award by the New Hampshire Council of Social Studies Awards Committee. She is currently studying for her Certificate of Advanced Graduate Studies at SNHU, and her motto, which I think is very interesting and always appropriate to think of this, particularly when you're having a down day, and that is to try to be the rainbow in someone else's cloud. Her colleagues, as well as the administrators, spoke glowingly of the work that she has done in particularly trying circumstances during this COVID-19 phase. I can only imagine the challenge it is for teachers to keep students engaged and attentive, and also trying to do their best to make sure that everyone is keeping up with what they're teaching. So I think we should be very proud to have the New Hampshire Social Studies Teacher of the Year right here in our Laconia Middle School. And I just want to recognize Kathy Bayless and the whole staff at the Laconia Middle School and say great job. That would conclude the mayor's report. Comments? I will not overlook the council comments portion right now. Councilor Hamel? Yeah, last time I missed it. That's why I went right over it, and you reined me in. So that's why I said council.
Oh, okay.
So now would be the appropriate time for council comments. You thought you were being called on.
Yeah.
Any council comments this evening? Councilor Cheney.
Thank you, Mayor. I on the way in here tonight, I went by our new skate park. And if there's any counselors or any citizens listening who haven't been by that park, I ask you to please make an effort to see what goes on there. The kids are mobbing the place. There are parents lined up in lawn chairs. If you go by at night, they have their headlights on to keep the function going. I'm so pleased that we approved that park. I can't see straight. Perhaps it's time to think about seeing if we can put another one someplace else in the city. But it's a miracle. I think it's just wonderful, and I'm sure if you haven't seen it, you should go and see it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Cheney. Right on the mark there. Any other council comments tonight? Seeing none, I'll move along to committee reports. Do we have any committee reports this evening that councilors would like to speak to? Seeing none, how about liaison reports? We move on to number 18 of our agenda. Councilor Hamel, yes.
Yes, just to say a few words about the colonial. Everything is going very well. There's one or two snags that I'm going to be bringing up at a future council meeting to see if we can resolve it. But The lobby is almost done. The terrazzo floors have been done on the main level. The carpeting is in the entrance to the theater. They've been powering up all the air conditioning and heat handling systems. So that's been, they've been working on that. The audio equipment has been going in. The drivers and amplifiers have been going in. And something pretty exciting that's going to happen at the end of this week is the marquee is going to be installed on the 25th of this week. There'll be a crane there and hoisting that thing up, and we should see that lit pretty soon, but I think we should have a special night to invite everybody downtown to watch the lighting of the marquee, of our new marquee. If you noticed, all the staging is down. The windows are all in the front. All the wood has been repaired. The molding has been replaced. It's all been painted. So the front of the building is really starting to shape up. So work is continuing. There's still some more things that need to be done, but it's looking very good.
Thank you, Councilor Hamel. Nice work, and always appreciate your updates on the theater. Any other liaison reports this evening? Seeing none, I'd ask to move on to number 19, which is citizens' requests to comment on current agenda items. There's an item on tonight's agenda you'd like to speak to. Now would be the appropriate time. Please raise your hand and Mr. Smith will welcome you into the forum.
Mr. Mayor, Charlie St. Clair has raised his hand.
Congratulations, Mr. St. Clair. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. I look forward to continuing that. I'd like to comment on the agenda item, not surprisingly, Motorcycle Week. So I'll just have a few words here. I wouldn't have even thought about saying this, even as short a time or long ago as 5 weeks ago. But as everybody can see, this continues to be a very fluid situation in the country, and I'm speaking about the virus, obviously. Very fluid, but we keep getting news every day. And even today, we heard about a new vaccine that's going to have an emergency test on it by the FDA, and will hopefully be out in several weeks. And that will give us 4 vaccines now in the United States for people to access. And I think I said before that President Biden, his plan was to vaccine 100 million people in the first 100 days, and that was surpassed in the first 50 days. So we're moving along. I know I've heard the date of April 22nd being when in the state of New Hampshire, all adults will be able to go and get vaccinated when they sign up for it. All good news, all good news. That being said, I would like to encourage the council to consider, hopefully at the next meeting, that Motorcycle Week be planned, or maybe the planning could even start now, that we would have a normal Motorcycle Week. And obviously, if things don't go as well as they're going now, then it would be easier to just say, okay, we're gonna have to scale things down a little bit. And of course, the governor holds the key to that. The governor, who was several times mentioned Memorial Day weekend as being an opening date. I have no idea what that means. But if things were to go south, then the governor could come out and say, you know what, we're going to move the whole state back to the way it was last March. I don't foresee that happening. But if it had to happen, that's where that would come from. And the other thing, that if there had to be mitigation made, and I'm obviously not inventing the wheel here, but again, things could be scaled down inside establishments. We all know that when you're outside, especially in warm weather, it's a much safer place to be as far as being exposed to potential people with the virus, or people that aren't wearing masks. And obviously, those precautions would still be encouraged. It sounds like for several more months, and we get that. But I think that the rally itself can go on like it has in past years, with some mitigation here and there as everything plans out. This is really just so important. We all know that. And I'm sure the council will do the right thing. I think that by the second week in April, we'll have even more really good news. And I guess that's really all I have to say. I just want to assure all of you that this is that we can do this as a city, and the association stands ready to do their thing. And I know that Councilor Hamel at the last meeting asked about vendors. I want to assure you that myself, and I know Jennifer, we hear from several vendors every day who keep calling up and wanting to know what is going on with the city and when is a decision going to be made. And we've also heard from some of the big players, property owners, who have also said that they're ready to just fill up their property with vendors. So those are just some of the things to think about. And I guess that's pretty much all I had to say. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. St. Clair. So if there's anyone else who would like to speak to comment on current agenda items, now would be the appropriate time. We're trying to keep comments to 3 minutes, if possible. Don't want to cut anybody off short. They're making, an elaborate point. So, but we will try to keep it to 3 minutes. So I'm waiting on your cue, Mr. Smith.
Mr. Mayor, attendee identified as Megan has raised her hand.
Hello, Megan. Welcome.
Hello and good evening. This is Megan Doptis. I am the general manager of Tower Hill Tavern, the Big House, and Weir's Beach Tattoo Company. I was calling to talk about Bike Week as well. We have huge concerns regarding Bike Week, Motorcycle Week. We still feel it's somewhat premature to make a final decision regarding whether or not to allow the usual happenings of Motorcycle Week to take place. With the vaccination numbers rising every day in our state, as well as every state around the country, we think that making a decision right now could or could not have such a huge impact on our economy at the current point in time would be unfair to the local businesses that are already starving and could use the boost in revenue to stay above water and, or to be quite honest, increase their chances of even staying open at this point. We think that it's definitely possible to maintain the guidelines during this important event and follow social distancing procedures as we have been without issue at all, no issue for the last 10 months. Being the biggest topic of conversation in the Weirs and talking with many other Weirs Beach and Lakes Region employees, bartenders, servers, business owners, convenience store owners, motel, hotel, cottage owners. I think we're all on the same page that to ask you that you seriously consider allowing Motorcycle Week to go off as it has for 98 consecutive years. We know the times are different, but they're ever improving. The small businesses in the area and in your state may not survive without it. So we just ask to be allowed this. And I guess to go along with what Charlie just said, we can always scale it back later, but we can't plan it later. So I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Megan.
Mr. Mayor, Lindsay Cole of Laconia Harley has raised her hand.
Welcome, Lindsay Cole. Nice to have you.
Thank you. Nice to be here. I'm going to follow up with what Charlie and Megan were saying and read a letter here from the owners of Laconia Harley Davidson, Ann and Steve Dealey.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. Dear council members, shortly after my husband and I purchased Laconia Harley Davidson in 2008, the country entered the most severe recession since the 1930s depression. Fortunately, our business and community had an economic and emotional boost to look forward to, Laconia Motorcycle Week. It is estimated that Laconia Motorcycle Week contributes $100 million to New Hampshire's economy. Roughly half of rally attendees visit our dealership and 25% of our sales occur during this event. We understand the decisions that were made to postpone last year's rally. From a financial standpoint, our sales were impacted, but we have always put the health and safety of our employees and customers first. Thanks to our strict adherence to state and local guidelines, we have been able to keep our dealership open and safe. Recently, we have seen renewed interest and support for Motorcycle Week in its traditional time in June. Harley-Davidson Motor Company restated their commitment to our rally and announced a partnership with New Hampshire Motor Speedway. The Meredith Select Board voted recently to allow vendors on site at our dealership and our partners, Hart's Turkey Farm. Vendors are a critical component of our Motorcycle Week offerings. Without the city of Laconia, Laconia Motorcycle Week doesn't happen, and customers don't visit our dealership or hundreds of other businesses. Laconia and the Weirs are the primary reason people attend. Potential postponement or cancellation of the rally would not only be detrimental to the local and statewide economy this year, but could jeopardize its existence altogether just as we approach the 100th anniversary in 2023. We are acutely aware of the current state of the pandemic, but we are also encouraged by the progress that has been made in these last 12 months. More people are eager to get outside, enjoy New Hampshire, and yes, spend money. With an event that is predominantly outdoors and spread throughout our region, we are confident that a safe, responsible rally can take place June 12th through 20th, 2021. As we emerge from a challenging year and long winter, these 9 days in June offer similar hope as they did after the Great Recession. We respectively ask that you support holding Laconia Motorcycle Week in June, as you have for 98 years and hope to for 98 more. Sincerely, Ann and Steve Dealey, owners, Laconia Harley-Davidson.
Well, thank you very much for reading the letter and into tonight's meeting and making it part of the record. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, an attendee identified as Bill G. has raised his hand.
Hello, Bill G. If you could let us know who you are and where you're calling from, that'd be great.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Yes, Bill Garbati. I'm a resident on the Laconia Meredith border line, and I have many friends and neighbors, and my personal some ancillary involvement in many small businesses in the region. And I'm also here to talk about support of Bike Week in June. I think the economic impact was just mentioned. I also know there's a significant charitable economic impact of about $250,000. Many great events every day, 2 or 3, that really support our charities. The small businesses need this to happen. I think when you start disrupting an event with different date changes and things, people have patterns, and it gets very hard. It could be very hard after a couple of years of changing this to get back to, what it was when we all wanted to be what it was. So I'm asking the council to support Bike Week, support our small businesses. I think everyone's learned to operate in a safe manner, to be around others in a safe manner, to protect those at risk in a safe manner. And that really the whole community counts on Laconia, as I said a couple of times, to really support this in the Weirs area. We're asking that the council begin planning. I think it was suggested to begin planning and then make adjustments as needed based on how things go in the field, but to allow this to go on. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for joining us, Bill. I appreciate your thoughts.
Mr. Mayor, Jose D'Amatos has raised his hand.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. D'Amatos, welcome. Nice to have you.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Quite well. Thank you. Welcome.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Jose D'Amatos, 1192 Weirs Boulevard, 1198, Channel Waterfront Cottages, Weirs Beach Convenience and Gifts. Obviously, we're speaking about COVID for over a year now. Overall, COVID-19 cases have decreased for the past 9 weeks. The current 7-day moving average of new cases has decreased 78.7% compared with the highest peak on January 11th of this year, and 20.9% compared with the second highest peak on July 23rd of 2020. On March 17th, there was a 3% decrease in the 7-day average number of daily cases reported compared with the prior week, which provides a very, very encouraging sign of continued progress. You obviously know how I feel about the event, the importance of the economic impact, not only to the Weirs Beach area, but as you heard from the lady from Laconia, Holly Davidson, many businesses in and around the area, many employees, landowners. It just came to my attention and probably everyone's attention that the town of Meredith has allowed the vendors to be in Meredith. And I urge the council this evening to please support the event. Give Mr. Myers the time to work and to get the permitting process going. Let the vendors know now that they can order their shirts, get their product, and please support Motorcycle Week to take place June 12th to 20th. Have vendors, have a traffic plan, and support it. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. D'Amatos.
Mr. Mayor, Christie has raised her hand.
Welcome, Christy. If you could let us know who you are and where you're calling from.
Well, this is John Turner. Can you hear me?
I can hear you,
Okay.
Mr. Turner. Where are you calling from?
Mr. Mayor, I am the new owner of the Broken Spoke Saloon, now the High Octane Saloon. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you.
I am very, very untechnical with these phones, so I'm using Christie's phone, so that's how we got it downloaded. And I just wanted to tell you, this will be our first motorcycle week that we will have this bar and restaurant. My family and I, Donna Turner and my daughter Alicia, have been running this place for the last 4 years now. We're in our 5th year here. So we would really, really like to move everybody to moving on with Bike Week here. I think it is a good time. Things are really planing out for us here. I think with the community, we wanted to make this a great place here for the whole community, for Laconia. And I think we've done a great job. Everybody enjoys this place. The food is great. The time is great for everybody. We are always recommending all of the hotels around here for people to stay on their weeks. It's just a great community. The city of Laconia has done such great things for so many years. I don't want to see this fall off the track. With the vendors are very important for everybody here. And, you know, all of the other establishments that work at Charlie St. Clair, I had words with Charlie a week or so ago, and I really got a feel of how Motorcycle Week runs and how much work the city puts into it. And then we get that. But I would implore you all to really consider to get this thing moving this year. It's a great time of year. Things are moving along. The COVID, I get that a lot of people are very, very scared of COVID, but I'll tell you, we've all had it in this state, and 99% of us feel pretty good about it. You know, it's fading away. I think by the time Bike Week shows up here, it's not even going to be in the news cycle. So once again, a pleasure meeting you all and listening to this, how it all works. Not very technical, like I said, but I would implore everybody that we really would like to see this all happen. And
Thanks very much, Mr. Turner. We appreciate your input and taking time to meet with us tonight.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, Amy has raised her hand.
Hello, Amy. Welcome. Maybe let us know who you are and where you're calling from.
Thank you, Mayor Hosmer. This is Amy Landers. I'm the executive
hello.
director at the Lakes Region Tourism Association.
Nice to hear from you.
Thank you. So we promote the Lakes Region in-state, out-of-state, and internationally to bring more visitors, second homeowners, groups, and events to the region to have a positive economic impact on all of our businesses here. We represent about 450 businesses. We do fully support Laconia Motorcycle Week and Jennifer and Charlie's efforts each year. And we do support Motorcycle Week being held this June. We know that retail is at 100%. Our craft fairs and outdoor events, such as craft fairs, are at 100%. The state has done a great job in setting up guidelines for our restaurants, our bars, our hotels, and other businesses in order to protect all of our visitors as well as our community and all of the members of these communities. So through this COVID pandemic, so we respect all of the state guidelines that they have put in place. So we feel the businesses in the region need this event and have done a great job following these guidelines and can responsibly put on Laconia Motorcycle Week for June 2021. So thank you for all your support and all of your time this evening.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for all the work that you do as well.
Thank you, Mayor Hosmer.
Mr. Mayor, no one else has raised their hand.
Okay. Moving along right now to number 20, which is the city manager's report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be brief tonight because I know we've had great input and also the audit presentation. So as you look at the project update, the big thing probably jumping out is spring is coming and street paving will begin. So we are already working on the breakdown lanes and sidewalk areas on Court Street and doing some work there this spring in anticipation for the bridge replacement this fall. We'll be seeing some water work begin on Franklin Street and go from Washington Street to Fairmont. So as conditions allow, that will begin. Sewer work is going to be beginning on Mechanic Street and through that area behind Canton's. And then obviously later in the season, we'll be looking at the major Elm Street project, which is water, sewer, drainage, sidewalks, paving down in that area all the way to Elm Street School or a little bit beyond. A couple of smaller spring projects that'll be reclamations, shims overlays type of thing. We're looking to be doing Shore Drive for a section of it. We're looking to do in the Weirs from the roundabout up to the Nazwa, and then also in the area from on Lakeside Ave from Foster to Centenary. So those are the major projects that are going on. Happy to take questions on that or anything else anybody may have tonight. And then we also have the economic development report. You can see where the inflation number, again, we're lagging a little bit, but on the January number, running at 5% as the country and the region had some challenges from the post-holiday spikes, and some businesses did go into some temporary shutdowns. So the January unemployment number in Laconia was 5%. Other areas of the county, Concord and Manchester, and the state were in the 4 to 5% range. You'll see the inflation number for the month of February, a small increase over January. So we're at a little over 1.5% inflation rate as we run through the first 2 months of this calendar year. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Mr. Myers. Any questions from councilors? Seeing none, we'll move right along to number 21, which is new business, number 21A. And this is a report was submitted by the city manager, Scott Myers. It's a request to approve a tentative agreement between the city of Laconia and the SCA, State Employee Association, for the period of July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. City Council has been briefed on the terms of the tentative agreement prior to this evening's meeting. I think at this point, we'd be looking for a motion to move that the City Council approve the tentative agreement between the City of Laconia and the SCA for the period beginning July 1st, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022. So made by Councilor Susi, seconded by Councilor Haynes. Is there any further discussion on this? Councilor Cheney, are you preparing to vote or did you want to speak? Okay.
Just getting ready to vote.
Good, good. All right.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, absolutely, Councilor Littman.
Should we just have the manager review the cost item and then we can take a look?
I think that's a great idea. I was hoping maybe we'd get a prompt with a question, but you did, so great.
Okay, I will unmute. So as was referenced in the motion you were looking for, this is a 1-year contract. This is a union that encompasses mostly administrative folks in various buildings, City Hall, Parks and Recreation, a member or two in the fire department, admin, and also some of our public works employees. encompassing 34 positions within this union. The total cost of the one-year contract, including those who are eligible for steps, an amount of a COLA, any retirement system costs attributable to new payroll, and the city's portion of FICA and Medicare is an amount of $83,203.
Make the motion to approve it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I think we've got the motion and the second right now. Continuing with discussion, Councilor Hamel.
Oh, no, I didn't see the second. I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. Maybe if we could do this a little differently next time. Is there any further discussion on this? Any questions of the city manager? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Yes.
Counselor Susie,
Yes.
Counselor Littman,
Yes.
Counselor Haynes,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Felch.
Yes.
6 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. Under 21B is a request to approve a tentative agreement between the Laconia School District and Educational Assistance of Laconia for the period July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2024. City Council has been briefed on the terms of the tentative agreement prior to this evening's meeting. City Manager, would you like to give us maybe just a couple of highlights on this so we can then move it to a vote discussion?
I can. So the 1 year costs are all that we can firmly estimate at this point. But this, as you'll see in the motion, is proposed to be a 3-year agreement. This is coming from the school department and the school board. This is the Educational Assistance of Laconia Union, which my understanding encompasses 99 staff members and covers paraprofessionals and secretaries. The 1 year cost for salary, FICA, and retirement of this contract is $59,302.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. So at this point, I'd be looking for a move that the City Council approve the tentative agreement between the Laconia School District and Educational Assistance of Laconia for the period beginning July 1st, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2024. So made by Councilor Felch, seconded by Councilor Susie. Further discussion on this?
The manager relay the second and third year cost as well, just so that transparency on that.
Yeah, estimates, and again, subject to the census of who's there. They're both in the just short of $79,000 for each year, year 2 and 3. 78,676 and 78,950.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Yes.
Counselor Susie,
Yes.
Counselor Littman,
Yes.
Counselor Haynes,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Felch.
Yes.
6 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. Moving on to number 21C, which is a request to approve a tentative agreement between the City of Laconia and AFSCME for the period July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. The City Council has been briefed on the terms of the tentative agreement prior to this evening. The City Manager would brief us on the high points on this, please, the highlights.
I will. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as you'll see in the motion, a 1 year agreement. This is for our AFSCME employees, American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees, which are our public works, heavy equipment, light equipment, laborer type of operators in the public works. There are 16 members in this union. And again, this would encompass the amount of steps for anyone who's entitled to them, a COLA, retirement system increases on the new money only, and increases on FICA and Medicare on the new money. And the value of the 1 year, the cost of the 1 year contract is $25,074 in terms of dollars.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. So right now, I'd be looking for a motion to move that the city council approve the tentative agreement between the city of Laconia and the AFSCME for the period beginning July 1st, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022. So made by Councilor Phelps, seconded by Councilor Haynes. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Yes.
Susie,
Yes.
Counselor Littman,
Yes.
Counselor Haynes,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yeah.
Counselor Felch.
Yes.
6 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. Moving right along now to number 21D, which is a request to appoint Marie Clark as Ward 2 Supervisor of the checklist for a term expiring at the end of November 2021. The current Ward 2 Supervisor of the checklist submitted his resignation on January 11th, 2021. This report was submitted by Cheryl Hebert, City Clerk. I'd be looking for a motion right now to appoint Marie Clark as Ward 2 Supervisor of the checklist for a term expiring at the end of November 2021. So made by Councilor Susie and seconded by Councilor Felch. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Yes.
Counselor Susie,
Yes.
Counselor Littman,
Yes.
Counselor Haynes,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Felch.
Yes.
6 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. Thank you very much, councilors. Moving along now to unfinished business under 22A, which is the second reading of Resolution 2021-04 relative to the acceptance of the New Hampshire Department of Safety Homeland Security grant in the amount of $250,000 to fund a command vehicle for the Laconia Police Department. Refreshing people's recollection, the command vehicle will serve as a mobile command center that would allow the Laconia Police Department to enhance operational communications with partnering emergency services and police departments during major events such as Motorcycle Week and Pumpkin Festival, and during active threat situations, including acts of terrorism. Recent full-scale active threat exercises highlighted a gap in our ability to operationalize communications to prevent or minimize an active threat. The only other vehicle available is available through Homeland Security in Concord, must be reserved ahead of time, which is not conducive to immediate need. The New Hampshire Department of Safety notified the city that its grant application had been awarded in late 2020. The entire cost of this mobile command center is covered by the 2020 Homeland Security grant. There is no local match requirement. This report was submitted by Glenn Smith, our finance director. We have a series of 3 motions right now. The first is be looking for a motion to move to waive the reading of Resolution 2021-04 in its entirety and to read by title only. So made by Councilor Cheney, seconded by Councilor Haynes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Yes.
Counselor Susie, you're muted.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Littman,
Muted.
Well, someone's muting me. I'm not muting myself. Yes.
Counselor Haynes,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Felch.
Yes.
6 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. The second motion is be looking for is a move to move a second reading of Resolution 2021-04 relative to the acceptance of the New Hampshire Department of Safety Homeland Security grant in the amount of $250,000 to fund a command vehicle for the Laconia Police Department. So made by Councilor Phelps, seconded by Councilor Cheney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Yes.
Counselor Susie,
Yes.
Counselor Littman,
Yes.
Counselor Haynes,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Felch.
Yes.
6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Third and final motion we'll be looking for is a move to approve Resolution 2021-04 relative to the acceptance of the New Hampshire Department of Safety Homeland Security grant in the amount of $250,000 to fund a command vehicle for the Laconia Police Department. So made by Councilor Cheney, seconded by Councilor Felch. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk. Oh, yes, go right ahead.
I just want to say for the public benefit and transparency purposes, I asked a question of the manager on the cost of maintenance and insurance and whether that would be any material impact on our budget. And he assured me that that there would not be any material impact. So that's why I'm voting yes.
Well, thank you. And thanks for slowing me down because I think that's an important question. And I appreciate you raising that issue, Councilor Lippman. Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Yes.
Counselor Susie,
Yes.
Counselor Lippman,
Yes.
Counselor Haynes,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Felch.
Yes.
6 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. And thank you for your work, councilors, and congratulations to the Laconia Police Department.
Mr. Mayor, are we going back to 21E perchance?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
21E.
Yes.
Geez, I thought we skipped over.
Going to number 21E on our agenda, which is discussion of Laconia Motorcycle Week event. A little out of order there, but I'll open this up to discussion. Actually, if you would the city manager like to start this discussion, or shall we open it up to the councilors and begin?
I would prefer to hear what the councilors and the mayor have to say on this.
Go right ahead. I'm happy to start with the councilors. Just let me know if you'd like to speak. We'll get you going. Councilor Felch.
Well, as everybody knows, I sent an email out this week to the other counselors with some information, basically how the COVID situation is going, and that it looks like everybody that wants to be vaccinated should be vaccinated by the end of April, at least by the end of May. Most of your experts are saying that everything will be done by the end of May. As we heard earlier, Meredith has opened everything up. They're going to allow permitting, everything, the vendors, etc. New Hampshire Motor Speedway is doing the same. They're going to open everything up. They're going to have the vendors there as they normally do. We've got art festivals, all kinds of other summer camps, fairs, everything that's starting in June. Hotels are booked pretty much solid for Bike Week and most of the summer for that matter. So in my opinion, we need to tell Scott or ask Scott to start planning for a normal motorcycle week. And if we have to cut back anything later, then we can do that at a later date and time. But I think we need to get this thing going.
Mr. Mayor, can I be recognized next?
Councilor Lippman, go right ahead.
You know, heard it from a number of people, including Councilor Felch, about the situation getting better. I just don't think that we're looking at the same statistics, nor are we looking at the same experts. I do think we should hold Motorcycle Week on its regular date. I do think that, you know, the Northeast in particular is above the national average. If you look at, it's not been decreasing, it has been increasing. The variants are increasing. If you watch the news, it's not a pretty picture. There are some favorable things, no doubt, happening. Just because you're vaccinated does not mean you have 100% assurance of not contracting. All our children will not be vaccinated by that date. And, you know, right today we have just over 12, maybe close to 13% of our population fully vaccinated in New Hampshire. All that's to say, I think that we should plan for an event. I think that the restaurants and the hotels can be at 100% capacity. There's no restrictions anymore on that. I think exercising you know, safety precautions for your patrons makes sense, and I think that's what we heard people who are wanting to run the event are interested in doing. I think with respect to encouraging the large gathering of crowds who have, maybe partake too much and too much to drink or something like that. I think we have some caution to be exercised there. So I don't think we should start from it's going to be wide open. I think we should start from a standpoint that yes, our local businesses can be 100% open because that's current state guidance, right, with appropriate social distancing. I think with respect to the balance of the event, I think some of the large scale gatherings need to be still approached with some caution. It's one thing to have being fully open in certain circumstances versus others where, the most extreme cases, you just have to look at what happened in Miami. And I'm not saying that's what we're looking at here in Laconia. But, we don't want to be in a situation where we can't control a crowd situation. And it's not that they're not observing curfews or anything like that, but I think we want to give ourselves the design to begin with that doesn't expose us to that potential and still have a great event.
So Councilor Lippman, if I hear what you're saying, it seems that you would like to position the city to scale up based on statewide data and also more regional data of what's going on with the virus. And I guess what you're saying is that if that number were to begin to, the number of infections, the control of the variants were to decline and the number of vaccinations were to increase, we could then potentially scale up if we thought it was prudent.
Yeah, I think, but to plan that it's not going to be there, I think and to have to pull back at the last minute, I don't think that's right. I think it's better to start at what we know is a large event, but not necessarily the if you will, the full. I think we can go on the date. We can have all the restaurants and the bars can be, what's allowed under state guidelines. But I think we need some control on the concentration of vendors and the concentration of people in one location. And that might be, outside stages. It could be, how we manage the center line and the weirs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Councilor. Councilor Hamel.
Yes, thank you. My thoughts on this is, and Tony might be surprised, but I agree somewhat with what Tony said, and I also agree with what Councilor Lippman said. I'm for having the bike week in June, as always, but there's some caveats that I would like to see. I'm for doing pretty much a regular motorcycle week, but the caveats that I'm looking at would be that we limit the amount of vendors. And I think that's what Councilor Lippman was, referring to. I think we could have the one-way traffic down on Lake Street or Lakeside Ave, rather. All the local establishments, like Henry said, they're open at capacity now, and that's fine, along with the hotels. But I think we still need to do some kind of precaution. And I would look for the city on the boardwalk to put half as many vendors there that we normally do, with them spaced apart. And I would also like to see the vendors on other properties the same way. But I think, all the tours that are set up, the charity rides and all that thing, I think it can go on. But I also agree with Henry, and I don't think hopefully it wouldn't happen here, but it's quite a mess down in Miami right now. Everybody is just waiting to do something. And, I think our local law enforcement is great at providing the security for these events. They've done it a long time. But also there's already been rallies that have been canceled. I'm a enthusiastic motorcycle rider. I try and go, all over the East Coast as much as I can. But Pennsylvania rally's been canceled again. Americade's been pushed to September. And those are some pretty good sized rallies, not as big as Laconia, but they still have the COVID fear in their mind. And I agree. I think everybody's getting a little tired of the COVID. They want to go out and experience life again. But I think we need to do it responsibly. As a city council, I still feel we're responsible for the health and well-being of the people who come here, along with the citizens. When things go wrong or whatever, it's the city council and the city manager that's going to be getting the phone calls, unless somebody else wants to give their phone number so we can divert those calls to them. But also, what we got to look at is how we're going to pay for this. This motorcycle week now has for a long time been paid for by vendor permits, that we get to pay for it. Other towns, cities, the state, they don't help to offset that bill. So, I'm glad Meredith and all that are doing their vendor stuff, but it ends up being Laconia that pays for all the security in the area. So, I'm willing to do a full motorcycle week, but I think we need to do some limitations, and I'd like to see the limitations on the amount of vendors that would be there. We can discuss the beer tents and all that there, where those would be large crowds that, it's gonna be hard to control. Like Henry said, there's still a large population, even in New Hampshire, that has not received all their shots. I doubt, I was just looking it up, and it's a little less than half right now that have had at least one shot. The kids in the city and surrounding areas, they won't be getting those till probably fall. So, I still think we need to be a little reserved, but I would like to see Motorcycle Week happen in its normal course. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hamel. Councilor Susie.
I'd like to offer Tony my support because I think he's going down the right path, but also what Henry has to say. My only thing is that let's do it, but are we saying tonight we're going to only do it in partial? Don't we can we reserve it and give the city manager time to put something together and come back in a month and see what the stats at that point say? I want to see us go ahead and do it, the motorcycle week, but as Bob said, and Henry and Tony, come back. We're not, this is not the final decision of what we want to do yet, but right, we're gonna let the city manager come back to us with his planning and everything else go on. Am I correct?
Well, just to talk here, I think we need to give the city manager some direction tonight on vendors and all that kind of thing, because the property owners still need to, send in their plan for how the vendors are going to look and all that kind of stuff, and that can't be done in 2 weeks. We usually start this in January, so you can see how far we are behind now. So a lot of work's going to have to be done between now and then, but Scott can weigh in on that, and they've been doing it for a long time. So, but I think some kind of decision needs to be made tonight on what it's going to look like, and if we're going to go full bore but limit the vendors, then we got to give them some kind of direction.
Well, Mr. Mayor,
please, Councilor Sissy, go right ahead.
If I may, then. To move this along, there's a motion to go ahead and move with Motorcycle Week, as we suggested before, with I don't know, whatever the percentage wants to be, but a limit on the number of vendors to 50, 60, 70%, whatever it comes out to be.
I'd like to hear Scott's opinion before we.
Before we get to a motion, hold that thought just a second, Councilor Susie, and be interested to hear. I give Councilor Haynes Cheney an opportunity to speak as well before we move to the vote or motion, if that's okay.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead, Councilor Haynes.
I think we just have to be careful. I support the rally in June, but with some restrictions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Haynes. Councilor Cheney, if you're ready.
I am.
It's showtime.
I find myself a little, I find myself supporting a lot of what's been said, but I hope we can also be flexible in the other direction. By that I mean, if picking a number out of the air, we say 50% of the vendors we normally have, if come, mid-May, things are looking really up, I'd hope we could open up more space for vendors to help with Councilor Hamill's concerns about paying for this. The other thing that concerns me is all this discussion doesn't talk about the obligation of the people who attend this to pay attention to their own health and well-being. And then had a shot, or, and this isn't mentioned very often, if you haven't had COVID-19 and survived, then you need to be more cautious. I think we should expect citizens and visitors, mostly visitors, to fend for themselves using some common sense about what they're going to participate in if they haven't either had a shot or two shots or had COVID and survived. So I support going forth in June, and if we see a necessity to place some restrictions, I hope we also are prepared to loosen those restrictions if in a month or two we realize things are not as bad as we are concerned. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Cheney. As I've stated before, my primary concern, number one, has been public health. And I think, Councilor Cheney, you touched on it a bit there. It's the idea of the people that we welcome into our city and the surrounding area to celebrate Motorcycle Week. Our expectations are high that they'll take a certain amount of personal responsibility. And it's not so much whether they've had COVID, it's the idea of those that are left behind, whether it be our student age population, our senior citizens, or city workers, coming down with COVID. That's a real concern. I think it's been mitigated significantly as more and more vaccines roll out and the uptake rate is increasing. I don't know when we get to herd immunity. That's not my expertise, but I think we're some distance from it right now. I think we've seen throughout the country, there certainly is a pent-up demand for people to get out and get back to something that's closer to normal life, if you will. I think, unfortunately, you do have some outlying events like Miami, of people maybe not behaving in the most responsible manner. Not saying that's going to happen here in Laconia. I think there's a demographic difference here as far as people being older and probably more mature and responsible, I believe. Item number 1A for me has always been, after public health, it's our local economy. And, this is critically important to particularly businesses in the Weir, but throughout the city. And certainly throughout our state. I think our role here is how do we properly balance those two priorities? And I think that's the challenge. I too support going forward in June, the 12th through the 20th. But I think that we should probably take a look at limiting capacity in our planning at this point, and still letting the data, as it becomes more closer to the dates of June, sort of guide our ultimate decisions. If we find out that our uptake rate on vaccinations, we have more and more people vaccinated and healthy, and we're really trending in the right direction here, I think we can probably scale up just a bit. But right now, I'd be sort of interested in hearing from the city manager as to is there a possibility to scale back the number of vendors in any given area, particularly in the enclosed areas, where I think we probably have a little more concern than maybe outside areas. I think we can do something here, and I think we can be prudent and be responsive as the data changes and the number changes going forward as to what we do.
All right, so I'll try to encapsulate the various thoughts. And if you said to me, based on what I've heard you all say tonight, and I was to put something down, pen to paper, what would I be getting back to you for your review? So I've heard loud and clear that there's consensus to hold the event in June, and that's fine. I've also heard this concern about limiting capacity and the more crowded areas. So I think what we would look to do is on vendors, maybe pull some site plan reviews that we've done in the past and kind of say, all right, what is, we randomly pull some different size ones and look at it and say how many vendors, how much coverage is on the lot, maybe is a way to go and determine, what does 50% of that coverage look like? What does 60% of that coverage look like? Is there some sort of formula that we can work with staff and say, that seems like it's a reasonable balance of getting vendors in there, but having a little bit of distance in between tents or booths or whatever may be set up. On the inside vendors, thinking of one property in particular, I don't know if that's just one large vendor who takes over that whole facility or whether there's multiple vendors in there. So I understand the concern about inside versus outside, but we'd have to look at the logistics of that. I think the areas that we focused on last year at this time, because we all know we had crowds in late June just for regular vacationers. 4th of July was crazy. All of July and August was very busy. And what we had always spoken of as a city was that we were holding Motorcycle Week, but we weren't looking to add capacity of additional places for people to stay and linger and converse. Whatever our bricks and mortar capacity was available for beds in the region, whatever our restaurant capacity that was available under the state guidelines at that particular time was what we had for capacity. And that was busy the whole month of July. So I think that was the kind of the stand we took, is that we're holding an event, but we aren't increasing capacity. We'd like people to pass through, enjoy one of our restaurants, one of our bars, enjoy some shopping, enjoy a ride, and then move on. So to me, the beer tents and or the Motorcycle Week entertainment stages would be areas that I would say right now it would probably make sense to not authorize, but those be things that we can look to ramp up to, in that May time frame as conditions approve. And anybody who has a year-round entertainment license in their establishment and would certainly allow to have their entertainment there because they're not a Motorcycle Week temporary entertainment license or a loudspeaker license, they've got it year round. So any of the establishments that have music, they've got it. All of our restaurants, as Councilor Lippman said, are at 100% if they can socially distance and, have the plastic shields or whatever it might be in order to keep them there. But I think the extra stages, right now there still is no dancing allowed. Right now, if you are in a bar, you are seated at a table with your group, or you're seated at a bar stool with your group. There's separation. There is supposed to be no, mingling of people standing around, joining together right now. So, I think by limiting stages and additional beer tents directly supports our local brick and mortar businesses. And those are the ones that we're trying to, work with and help them have an economic boost through Motorcycle Week. So those would be the areas that I would come back in and provide some framework. I do believe that whether it's the city and its vendors or whether it's private property owners and their vendors, we need to give some guidance now as to, how many can come so that people can make their plans. They can ramp up, their inventory or go to the printing presses or whatever it might be for their goods that they're going to sell. I think you could always continue to add, and the city could certainly have a waiting list for boardwalk spaces. Private property owners could have a waiting list if things look good in May and we say, okay, we're ready to go, and bump it up a little bit. I think bumping it up is far more preferable than going 100% now and then finding that we need to have winners and losers and scale back significantly a month before the event. Some smaller things like what does the parking and traffic pattern look like? I don't think that's a decision that needs to be made tonight. We could work and look at the conditions and determine, center lane parking, no center lane parking, one way, bikes only, all of that. We can figure that out, in May sometime. But I think for the vendors and for the establishments to know where they need to staff up and start, building their crew and work on laying out their plan for these 10 days. I think giving some guidance now is preferable.
Scott, I, as you were saying that, and the difference between scaling up and scaling down, if we were to attempt to scale down, you would then possibly be following up with vendors who you've already issued a vendor permit to and telling them that they had to return it and they'd be expecting a refund. I mean, I think that might create for an awkward situation as opposed to maximizing the number of permits based on reduced capacity now, but then having a wait list, I would think, based on the city council coming back in the coming weeks and saying, well, the numbers are moving in the right direction. We might be able to go from 50 to 60% or 50 to 75%. That seems to be far more feasible in asking you to access the wait list as opposed to denying.
Yeah, and I think a couple of people pointed out that if folks know they're able to come to Laconia and they're guaranteed to have a spot, quote unquote, they're going to go get t-shirts silk screened and they're going to do things that need some lead time. There may be other vendors whose items maybe aren't as customized and they're able to adjust a little more quickly. So as private property owners, look at who they want for vendors, there may be some that need that 100% definite commitment. I'm going to go out and do a run of shirts. I need to know that I'm going to have a spot to sell them in Laconia.
Yeah, right.
That's why I say we got to be sensitive to doing some kind of a commitment sooner than later. But again, I think it's far easier to ramp up. How do you tell somebody, yeah, I know you just ran a run of 5,000 t-shirts specific to Laconia, but we're scaling back and now you can't come.
Yeah, that's it. And I think you touched on it as well in your remarks, Scott. The brick and mortar places that are full-time residents of our community. Those are the places and the people that I tend to think about when I think about what this pandemic has done to people and what can we do to continue to support them. It's great to have the vendors come into the city and visit us and sell their wares and goods, of course, but it's really the people who have been, here full-time for a long time, trying to scratch out a living in very tough circumstances that I am concerned with. Councilor Hamel, go right ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. To give Scott some kind of guidance, and the other councilors can weigh in on this, but I would suggest doing 50% of the vendors at this point. And that if things look better as time goes on, then we can ramp up. But I agree that starting high and going down isn't going to work. It's going to cause a lot of problems and a lot of people being mad. So I think if we go with the 50% and if things look better in May, then have a waiting list, like you said, Mayor, and we can call people in to fill some of the other vendor spots.
Councilor Lippman.
I was just, in terms of Councilor Hamel, were you also referring to bear tents and stages that are not already existing in what you were saying?
Yeah, well, I would say that, going along with what Scott said, as far as beer tents and that wouldn't be allowed at this point. All the restaurants and local establishments that have their year-round permit, like Scott said, they can, go to full capacity. I think we're just looking at beer tents that tend to accumulate a lot of people at close quarters. So, I wouldn't agree on those right now.
Councilor Felch.
Yeah, just a couple thoughts. Say we limit a place that has 20 vendors to 10 vendors, and then those 10 vendors are sitting right side by side. Wouldn't it be easier to limit how close vendors can be from each other? Then a certain percentage?
That's the idea of limiting the vendors. I mean, if a property can hold 10 and now they can hold 5, then they have to be spaced apart. And just like if we're on the boardwalk, if we have 10 spaces, then we're only going to be allowed to do 5 vendors. There'll be 10 feet in between because we got 10-foot spaces.
And the other thing we're doing with the beer tents, especially if it's a privately owned place, say the Broken Spoke, they normally have a beer tent outside. If we don't have a beer tent, we're pushing people inside where it's a lot safer to be outside.
I think one thing we can do, and we certainly supported it in the city, and liquor enforcement supported it last year, is they had additional tents up for outside dining, and people were certainly allowed to have alcohol under the tent for the outside dining. So I think what we would be looking at is just maybe not having extra bars set up outside, or just extra beer tub stands, but if anybody who did additional outdoor dining last year certainly had the ability to have alcohol out there, and we supported and wrote letters for any business last year. So in the case of the Broken Spoke, they can have tents up for additional capacity, which doesn't drive people inside, not just for the true beer tent, but again, seated, which is the state requirement. People are seated and they're with their group and they're socially distanced. There's no reason they can't have alcohol with a meal under those parameters if it's served to them, or they walk up and make a purchase and come back and sit down.
So we're basically doing the opposite of what Daytona did. Daytona limited their restaurants and bars inside to 60%, but yet they permitted everything outside. I think by our next meeting, we're going to see what happened in Daytona and get a better idea of what's going on. So,
Tony, excuse me, Councilor Felch, we can't set a restriction that's greater than the state's restriction. The state's restriction right now is 100% capacity with social distancing. So I don't really think we had the option. And I think we would be hurting the local businesses based on how our economy is set up.
Well, the businesses actually did that themselves and worked with the city on the situation.
I'm just not sorry, I don't follow your comment.
Yeah, I didn't understand that.
The businesses are the ones that approached the city of Daytona to go 60% so they could have more entertainment outside.
So I think that for anybody who has a year-round entertainment licenses, there are places that are able to have entertainment outside. There's at least 2 that come to mind, 3 that come to mind, whose entertainment license is for outdoor patios, decks, outside spaces. So that would not change. If you've got the year-round entertainment license, you're good to go as long as you're following the state guidelines and people are seated and separated.
So Scott, in looking and considering what you might need for some direction right now, I think you've got all the information. It's just a matter of whether we have, a consensus here to begin the process of planning for June 20th, the 12th to the 20th, at something closer to a 50% capacity for the vendor permits. And, with the idea of coming back at our first meeting in April with additional data and maybe some analysis of where it's trending as far as the virus is concerned and vaccines.
So if you were to give that as consensus, I would work with staff immediately and just pull a couple of approved site plans from prior years and try to figure out, like Councilor Felch said, what we can get for coverage on a lot with appropriate distance, between vendors, and start at 50. But if there's a margin of error, we would go to the greater number rather than a smaller number. So if the consensus was we think we should start at 50 in a particular lot, a particular layout, or as an odd number, and we go 50 plus, that's where we'd be reaching out to property owners through our planning staff to say, this is the basis we are working on now, subject to change if positive trends emerge in May. We would be able to let boardwalk vendors know, although we're going to have to, have some winners and losers there because obviously we would have to go with that 50 to 60% capacity as well, unless there was an approach that we wanted to line them, fully down the boardwalk and separate. I don't know where that works with logistics of electricity where we've got in certain areas right now. So I'd have to look at that. But and now we would be saying, the city would not be issuing beer tent or entertainment or temporary entertainment licenses strictly for motorcycle week. It would be the year-round folks who've been established with us in the past who would be able to do that. We would encourage any bricks and mortar establishment to add an additional tent outside for dining capacity, which also allows people to have a beverage of their choice while they're sitting outside under the tent. We obviously need to do routine tent inspections just for public safety, but that's what we would be starting on tomorrow if that was the consensus, with the hope that this all goes away sooner than some of us think and there's an opportunity to ramp up.
I think that's sounding like something that we should begin doing. And I think we should also keep the dialogue open between the Motorcycle Week Association and continue to do some things like hand sanitizing stations around the boulevard, and some of those areas where, Lakeside Avenue, where people tend to congregate. I think the idea of being a little more proactive with that this year was probably a good idea.
And I think that we haven't talked about the rides, but I think the rides that we're taking off from rally headquarters and kind of just working the cones in the staging area there. And most of those rides started at 10 or 10:30 in the morning. I think that worked fine. And I think we could continue to, support, those events that want to stage and leave from the weirs, as long as it's in that time frame in the morning. I think that's perfectly all right.
And I think also the Macros ride should be able to go on also.
And that went on last year. So yes, I think we can support the rides.
Yeah.
And I can tell you the association's more than happy to go through the weirs, spray like they did last year, put out hand sanitizing stations, do the promoting of the mask and social distancing, everything they did last year in August.
Yeah. And I think if Scott's looking for a consensus or a motion, that we should do that. And so he can contact the landowners and they can start lining up vendors. So, if they got to print t-shirts, they can get that done. Only a couple months left.
Okay. So is that, would you make the motion, Councilor Hamel?
I would, of what Scott said.
Seconded by Councilor Susie. Is that a satisfactory wording of a motion, Councilor Susie, you'd consider seconding? You.
Yes.
Good, terrific. Okay. So would there be further discussion on this issue this evening? Yes, Councilor Littman.
I just want to make sure that our clerk has a reasonable sense of what she would document in the minutes.
Absolutely, I do.
Will it be produced by tomorrow morning?
We will insert a hyperlink with a verbatim.
A lot of pressure. Okay, if there is no further discussion, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll on this.
Councilor Cheney,
Yes.
Councilor Susie,
Yes.
Councilor Littman,
Yes.
Councilor Haynes,
Yes.
Councilor Hamel,
Yes.
Councilor Felch.
I just want to make sure this is including all rides because they have another ride planned for Friday night. It's a light up ride where the bikes will be lit up.
Yeah, that's
I don't
the
think
one
this affects the rides at all. Am I wrong about that?
No, and that's the one that's going to leave here from City Hall parking lot at dusk or whatever, so people can see the lights. So I think any rides, those are easy. The bikes come in and, you tell people to stay with their bike or their group and you're 6 feet apart.
Yeah.
So yes, the rides we would encourage and find a way to have them happen.
I will vote yes with the notation that I think it should open up completely, but it's better than nothing.
Appreciate you being amenable to some form of compromise, Councilor Felch, on this. Sounds like 6 votes in the affirmative, so that motion passes. And we'll wait to the next steps from you from the city manager.
All right.
Thank you, councilors. That concludes the public portion of our agenda this evening. The council will be going into a non-public session under RSA 91A:3, Roman 2, parentheses D, consideration of the acquisition, sale, or lease of real or personal property, which if discussed in public would likely benefit a party or parties whose interests are adverse to those of the general community. I will say when we return from non-public session, it will only be to adjourn. There'll be no further business taken up by the city council at that time. So I'd ask that, I'm so slow on this, I gotta tell you. Is this a motion right now to go into non-public, Scott?
Yes, you need a motion and a second and then a roll
I need a
call.
motion and a second and a roll call. So we're looking for a motion, Councilor Cheney, seconded by Councilor Hamel, thank you. And Madam Clerk, if you can call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Yes.
Counselor Susie,
Yes.
Counselor Littman,
Yes.
Counselor Haynes,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Felch.
Yes.
6 votes in the affirmative. We'll be going into non-public session right now.
I just love this job.
You do.
Yeah. I may never do it again, but I got a call from
I see the park is being well used again. Oh, well.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And more on the way.
All right.
What is that?
Yeah, I think Comcast was on my street today running wires. Maybe I can be done with ABB sometime soon.
Okay, whatever.
I'm
There you go.
I've been waiting.
Counselor Susie, Counselor Hamel are now with us.
You guys got fast fingers to type all that stuff to get back.
We are back in public session. The motion to seal the minutes from our non-public session. So made by Counselor Haynes. For how long?
6 months.
6 months. We need a second and a vote.
I'll second.
Second by Counselor Littman.
Okay, we'll do a vote. We've got Counselor Cheney,
Yes.
Counselor Susie,
Yes.
Counselor Littman,
Yes.
Counselor Haynes,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Felch.
Yes.
6
Six votes in the affirmative. The motion, the minutes of the non-public session from this evening will be sealed for 6 months. With no further business on our agenda, I'd like to adjourn City Council meeting at 9:53 p.m.
Good night.
Everybody.
Good night.
Here, guys.